Is it? I'm looking at this
Yeah,
one.
we're live.
Union guys are gonna be mad you're doing their job.
Recording in progress.
Good evening and welcome to the December 4th, 2024 Yarmouth Planning Board meeting. I am Joanne Crowley, Chair. This is to formally advise that as required by Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, paragraphs 18 to 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain state of emergency accommodations signed into law on June 16th, 2021, the Yarmouth Planning Board will hold a public meeting on December 4th, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. Public is welcome to attend in person this evening or via alternate public access provided on the notice of meeting available on the Town of Yarmouth website. I will begin by taking roll call. Susan Britta.
Here.
Will Rubenstein.
I am here.
Jim Saban.
Present.
Peter Slovak. Ken Smith.
Here.
Joanne Crowley, present. Seeing that we have a quorum present, I'll now call the meeting to order, and I would ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This evening on our agenda, we have one item that we will be discussing with regard to the newly formed Mattakees Utilization Committee, MUC. Kathy has provided in our packages a November 26th memo from the committee chair outlining the land use team process that will be utilized for the evaluation of the former Mattakees Middle School property at 400 Higgins Scroll Road. In addition, Kathy had provided to the committee a memo providing the zoning summary and a brief site analysis for the property. I'd also like to add that Kathy and I just returned from a meeting with Bill Scott to go over some questions we had on the role of the planning board and its membership on the various committees that are being formed to formulate this proposal and recommendations on the use of the Mattakees property. So Kathy, I'd like you to run through the couple of documents you shared with us in our packet, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
Sure. I think the first thing we want to make sure, we did get a specific invite, the planning board member to participate and have representatives on each of the teams that we'll discuss. So that's something that at the end of the discussions, we're going to go over and see who wants to be on what committees. We do have some people already on committees, like Joanne is on the Community Housing Committee and Peter Slovak's on CEDC, but there's others that we would like to see if we can't find someone who'd be interested in being a representative. So it's a very interesting process. Basically, the MUC is going to be serving basically as liaisons to a bunch of different land use teams. They really want to take advantage of all the expertise that's out there from town staff, from different committees, different organizations, and utilize all of that to come up with different ideas for the use of that site. And again, with each team having a liaison from the MUC being present on each of those land use teams.
Kathy, can I just ask one question?
Sure.
Initial question. Are they making a distinction between land use and actual proposals? They use the term land use, and then in other instances, so I'm assuming land use would be recreation, and then the proposal would be something more specific.
Correct.
Okay,
It would be
good,
like
good.
4 soccer fields and 2 ball fields and that type of thing. And the
Okay.
housing would be
An actual proposal.
and pickleball,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
So just kind of to highlight, and I think this is where a lot of those different teams came from, was the charge that's actually part of the MUC's charge, and it has to do with looking at different areas of the economy, cultural, recreation, tourism, social housing, parks, community centers, or educational development of the town of Yarmouth. So those are kind of where the main teams came from. And what they're basically going to do is each team is going to be developing proposals that they're going to be providing to the MUC. We'll go into a little bit more detail on how those are happening right now. I'm just going to zoom in here so everyone can see this a little bit better. But these are the different teams that are being looked at right now. It's housing, and they're going to be having different people from the Community Housing Committee, the Affordable Housing Trust, and the public, talking about different housing opportunities. Oh, it sounds like I'm,
Yeah, it's back there. It's this one. Sorry.
oh,
There you go.
no worries. And economic development and tourism, using CEDC and the chamber and the businesses. Recreation, we have a recreation commission, as well as staff, and like reaching out to different leagues. Education, so the school, the property obviously contains two schools, one in the former Mattakees, and then the Emmy Small is still an active elementary school there, in need of some serious refurbishment. We're also looking at open space and water supply, and then the other one will be municipal services, different types of buildings and uses that could be.
Kathy, is there the green arrow between economic development and recreation, is that significant? 'Cause I don't
Oh,
see-
yes, yes, it is. It's interesting, because I think basically what they're saying is there's a good synergy between economic development and recreation. So if you had tournament-level fields and that type of thing, that could be an economic driver for the town of Yarmouth. So that, yeah, good catch there. So this is,
I would think there'd be synergy with economic development with most of these.
so the different teams are going to be reaching out and, like I said, to the different types of groups, and then they would be reporting to the MUC, who would then ultimately be reporting to the select board. And all of these different open meetings are going to be an opportunity for public participation. I think they're going to actually have some more specific public outreach. Once we have some ideas to actually present to people, right now it's just kind of more brainstorming initially.
On that, Kathy, if I can interrupt for a
Sure.
second. When we met with Bill Scott this afternoon, I mentioned our meeting on January 29th with the public, and he had asked that as we go through our public outreach on the local comprehensive plan, that we make sure that the MUC and its various land use teams are aware of what we're hearing, so that those two things aren't at cross purposes at some point. They need to link up and be complementary to each other, so that if we're hearing things from the public about certain things that none of these committees have raised, they want to hear from us what we've heard from the public and utilizing our outreach essentially. And why not? It's a common forum to gather some ideas. We will be, in whatever way we can, reporting back to these land use teams some of our findings from our public outreach.
I think we also, in all of the work that we've done already, have some idea of some of these issues as well, so that's going to be helpful. So they're basically proposing 3 meetings initially. The first meeting would be in January. It's called Run Amok. So it's basically any idea you have, kind of throw them out and have a whole detailed discussion, and then develop a bullet list of various ideas that you might want to take a look at. The next.
Committee.
By team, yeah, by team, yep, exactly. And then in February, be a reconciliation meeting where you would narrow the ideas down to a proposal with 3 ideas on 1 page. The MUC's going to provide a format, so each team would be, it'd be apples to apples, they'd have the same format that they would be doing. So you may have thrown everything in the kitchen sink out there in your first meeting, but now you're going to narrow it down. Well, what are really the 3 things that we think are the most important for ideas? And then moving forward to a 3rd meeting, which would be happening in March, where you would basically come up with some idea of an actual proposal. And these would be different ideas. You might have something that he's been calling elevated. So this is kind of your pie in the sky. This is what you'd really like to have, and then maybe scaling it down a little bit, modifying a little bit, and having a moderate plan.
So Kathy, the teams are actually going to make those 3 recommendations and bring it to the MUC? Is that how?
Yes.
And then the MUC just looks at those 3, and then ultimately they have to skinny that pile down, correct? That's right. Okay.
Yeah, they're the final, I guess, recommendations would come from the MUC
Okay.
to the select board in those presentations. Yeah, sorry, thank you. So it's really refining the ideas that you came up with in February, and I guess they're looking for nothing more than like a 4-page description of what you're looking at. What's actually going to be happening in April and early June is actually coming up with a little bit more detailed, an actual like formal proposal. It's almost be like they would develop an application. It's kind of like a grant application where you would basically say, this is what we're proposing, this is how it benefits, this is why we feel there's the need for it, and maybe even if you have some ideas of where there might be some possible funding sources. I know that the Assistant Town Administrator, Bill Scott, has a lot of great ideas on that I think we can find different ways of paying for things, because I think if we come up with all these grandiose ideas and the taxpayer thinks that we're all paying for it, it's never going to get us anywhere. So we need to be sure that we have a clear idea of how we might be able to fund some of these things. So this would be something where you would be getting staff help, but there's also the ability to get some different funding for consultants. CEDC has some money if they wanted to put some tourism revenue preservation funds related to that, maybe come up with some ideas for that. The Recreation has that $125,000 that they had for a rec field study, which I don't know exactly the status of that, but that's something where they would have funding for that. And then Housing has money, different pots of money that they can use for, brief feasibility kind of layout study of some different options for housing. And again, always staff can be part of that process. So I think what really kind of gets down here is looking at the specific work that you would be doing. Housing is, as I mentioned, the Housing Trust, Community Housing Committee, obviously Mary Wagon, the housing staff, and ComDev staff. And then they would be working with other applicable groups to kind of come up with a housing plan, looking at different needs that we have in our community. And then also taking a look at what infrastructure might be necessary. I think if we're going to be doing anything that results in some higher density housing, obviously septic systems in that particular area, which is fully in our zone 2, is not acceptable. So we would need to make sure that we have a mechanism for getting wastewater to the site. If it's something that's relatively low intense use, maybe it's just all ball fields, maybe we don't need to worry about getting wastewater to the site. Recreation is obviously Recreation Commission staff and different user groups, really looking at maybe possibly using the existing building there. There's the auditorium, they're using the gymnasium now. Is that something they want to continue doing? And then looking at cross-referencing with tourism, like I mentioned, is there the opportunity to have tournaments here and draw people for heads and beds? Because, I hear from some of these parents, they're like, yeah, I had to trudge all the way to blankety blank and stay 2 nights and eat out in all the restaurants because my kid was in this big soccer tournament that was being done. So it's fairly common practice. And I guess the same thing with pickleball, but you need to have a certain number of courts together and that type of thing. So there's going to be synergy between that. And also economic and tourism, CEDC, the chamber, and businesses, and I think also the Cape Cod Chamber has some ideas for us as well. So just looking at not just, what can we get directly, but what's the ripple effect? How, if you have a particular use and it results in these indirect, more heads and beds and that type of thing, then that's going to be definitely an economic benefit to the town. And again, coordinating with the tourism. Education, I think that one's going to be a little bit more difficult because we need to work with the schools, and I'm not sure exactly how far they are with regard to their feasibility study or where they stand. We all know that Emmy Small is in bad condition, and they keep applying to the state to get it on their building authority, state building authority, school building authority.
Right.
Thank you. But I don't think we made the last round. But it's going to be a situation where maybe this is a case where, okay, we know they're going to possibly need some space there. We block out 10-acre portion of the site and say this is where you would put an elementary school. And if they decide, wait a minute, maybe we're just going to rebuild or expand at Station Avenue, then we can see, well, what else could we put in that little block that we blocked off for schools, or maybe it stays open space, or maybe it's an extra field or something along those lines. And then we also want to look at open space and water supply, so talking with Open Space Committee, Conservation Commission, and the Water Department on different ways that we can, what would we need to do to preserve the water supply? Lots of times we'd like to own and protect all the land 1,000 feet from a drinking water well, so that's something that would probably be considered. As you look later in the mapping that we have there's a bunch of wetland resources as well as habitat that we might want to protect, and there's some trails that we might want to say these are great trails that are being used. Maybe that all becomes part of a kind of an open space preserved area on the site, but we need to take a look at all of those natural resources. And then municipal and social services, I think this is really working with staff and the different social services. What type of Is there any interest in having some municipal facilities being located there? Is that a good place for a library? We keep talking about a community center. Maybe it's some type of synergy along those lines, as well as obviously the recreation that might be going on in the existing building. But separate to this is also ongoing, is a full evaluation of that Matikes building to make sure, to basically identify what could be preserved and what would be too
Kathy,
expensive.
when will that analysis be ready? Will be ready in time, obviously, for conversation as this proceeds, correct?
I think that we have hired, it's that Axios, to do a technical review of the building. I'd like to think that that needs to be part of the municipal services aspect, so I'd like to think that it would be something that could be done in the next couple months, because we really need to know,
Right.
are we retaining any of this?
I would think it needs to be done in conjunction, so that way we know what's going on with the building and what truly is feasible there.
Right. I mean, I think, and I also think, when we're moving forward, we'll probably have to make a bunch of different assumptions. Okay, maybe we say we're keeping the auditorium and the gymnasium, but we're going to get rid of all the other little pods and just accept that. But if we're getting rid of that, the mechanicals are over here, so we need to build new mechanicals so that we can heat and that type of thing. So all of those things need to be taken into consideration. And there's, solar panels there, just assuming that, okay, let's assume that we're not going to have those there. What would we do? Or what would we do maybe if we wanted to retain them? All of those things can be looked at individually. And I think the whole idea is to kind of vet all of those things, get all those ideas out on the table, and then if we put it off the table, why did we do that? And then people ask later, why did you do that? We can say, well, we had looked at it here and we decided not to do it because of this. And so that all that documentation is kind of being done. It's a lot of work, I think, for the teams to develop all of this and come up with an actual proposal, because basically you're, in a little bit, competing. You're trying to make the best proposal possible to the MUC so that your ideas get included in the more detailed site layout plans that get done and move forward to talking with the select board about that. And then
Kathy,
again,
I just want a quick interruption with regard to Axios. I just want to make reference to the package that I had gotten from the first meeting of MUC, and this Axios has been contracted as the technical consultant and reviewing the site and prior reports. And additionally, the consultant is going to look for gaps in the prior reports and generally any building code issues to determine the building's general compliance, and get a hands-on understanding of the issues of the building. But even more interesting, they talk about, beyond these technical reports, the town communications department will be producing a video for the main building to highlight the issues identified in the pending report, because we believe the technical report is not the best method to convey the building conditions to the public.
Yep.
Seeing is believing, as the saying goes. Therefore, the video is meant to articulate the report in a more direct and visual approach. They're also hesitant to allow people in the building because of its condition. So this would be the safest way for the public to see what the condition of the building is now. So that's part of the consultant agreement with Axios, and they've already been retained.
it's a good layering of more information so that people understand, well, why did you get rid of that building? It was great. I remember it being awesome. No, wait a minute, it has all this laundry list of building code issues. It has mold, or the roof is done and expired and its life expectancy and it would need to be replaced. So all of those things will be identified to get a full understanding.
Joanne, can I ask, I did not see that. Is there a deadline for that report to get?
There's no calendar anywhere, on this anyway. No, I haven't seen a calendar for that. I have not. There's a calendar on the teamwork. You know, this one is February, this one's March, this one's April.
Yeah.
But on the consultants, I don't know
Yeah, but
what the
this-
term is.
This information is so essential,
Without that,
whether you take it down or reuse it. I mean, that is one of the fundamental parameters of the discussion. So this should be,
going into it blind, you're asking teams to ask them to do something, they don't know the condition of the building.
follow up with that, Kathy? Who
Yep.
would-
I think you got to just make the assumption the building is of no use and start at that, with that assumption.
I'm not sure they have, because when we spoke with Bill, they spoke of the auditorium. And parts of the building are very salvageable, apparently. I'm saying that, I'm not Axios, but that's why we need Axios to come in and say, gee, is the auditorium salvageable? And
But you could still proceed with the assumption that, let me pull something out of the air. Say recreation thinks it's a great idea to keep the basketball courts in the auditorium, but also to build, in conjunction with economic development, a convention center. Well, maybe it's better, I mean, they go with the assumption that they're keeping it, but if they start to look at the convention center, they're going to realize that even though it's okay to keep it, it's better off just tear it down. So you can look at it with the assumption that, yeah, maybe we could keep this, but if we can't because of the overall, and I'm not suggesting any of that stuff, that's just trying to give us an idea of how you could proceed. Do you keep it or you don't keep it?
Kathy, can I ask another?
Until they come up with that definitive, hey, by the way, you can keep this for, turning all the, doing what John Simpkins did, turn all the rooms into
housing.
apartments or
Right.
something. But until you get that, I think there's a way to proceed with just making some assumptions.
Kathy, on page 5, in the blue blocks, they have all the teams, and yet on page 6, they include planning board at the very bottom. Is there a significance to that, or is that
I don't think we are a specific team. I think he's just kind of
a
identifying.
resource, more of a
I
resource?
think more of a resource, and I think it's also be good, you guys do a great job reporting back when you go to these different committees so that all of us can kind of hear what's going on with the MUC. I'd like to go to as many meetings as possible because I think it helps to hear what each team is saying personally. And you miss something if you're not hearing all the things.
So, for example, we're looking at all of the parameters that we're dealing with. One of the, we can certainly locally deal with any planning requirements, any zoning changes. One of the things that we hear, that if not impossible to deal with, if we have to change it, if not, highly, is environmental issues. So one of the things I think that maybe the planning board should look at is maybe making some recommendation that plans that require, or ideas that require massive environmental relief need to be really looked at, because it adds so much time to, if we get at all, if we get anything at all. If we get relief at all. If you have to go to the state to get relief for environmental issues, she knows better than anyone.
Permittability.
We're really good at it now. Let's do it again.
Permittability is obviously something significant, and I think that's why I wanted to do the map so that I could identify what are these critical resource areas that we need to
And
avoid.
the two sections that you identify are very good. One is you cannot waive this, and the other is within 100 feet, I think you said you have. Those kinds of things need to be taken into account and maybe set a parameter for the discussion, that every team be made aware of, that if you.
I sent this to give to the MUC, and then I also sent it around to a bunch of different
Okay, so
staff,
so-
the zoning ones, so that they would have it. But Bill also mentioned that he was having one of the consultants, Pear, was going to be doing an actual 24 by 36 two-scale map with all of the different resources on there, and hopefully with the 100-foot setbacks and
All the
and the
teams will
1,000-foot.
have that information and
They sh-
incorporate it into their discussions.
I don't see how you
Okay.
can do your task without having that.
And same with the ultimate
restrictions.
disposition of the
Yeah,
building.
site
Without
constraint.
that,
Very
yeah.
difficult to.
That's a very valid point.
So in the memo, Susan, I think they're suggesting that there are some of the teams that already have a planning board member,
Right.
Yes,
That's
yes.
correct.
but they're also suggesting that we fill in the blanks.
Correct.
That's one of the things.
Have a member on each team.
That's
So
one of the-
rather than us being a separate team, us to be parts
Like
of
a
other
resource,
teams.
almost like a resource. Okay.
So that is an outcome that I would like to have tonight, if we can.
So then it's basically the end of the memo, just kind of working together. I think the timeline personally is very aggressive.
It's very ambitious without having all the, I really think it's not even feasible. I hate to say it that way, but without all the facts and information, I think their timeline's extremely aggressive.
Particularly the site restrictions.
That's right.
Until you know that, hey, it's a 70-acre parcel, but, oh, by the way, 40 of it you can't
Can't
use
use,
because of
exactly.
this, that, or the other thing.
Yep.
It's kind of like what we dealt with the drive-in. We had, restrictions to the site is because of how it was purchased. That may be part of what we find when we look at this.
That's why I did the Mass Mapper map, because I need to, I want to know. And having that,
We're dealing with.
the small little wetland in the front is unfortunate, because, you could have done a lot of stuff right there. Now you're going to have to block out a little area there and kind of protect it.
Kathy, can I ask a question? Am I wrong in assuming that the school department I would believe they would have done an assessment on the building prior to deciding to build a new school.
They did, and they have,
Does the MUC have access to that, at least as a baseline?
I don't know whether the MUC does, I'm sure, but the consultant has that, and they're doing a technical review of that report as well as a physical review of
Assessment,
it,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
So the school committee went before the Board of Selectmen and expressed an interest in them preserving a section of this site for the potential to build a new school. But I also understand this discussion about, oh, wait a minute, time out, weren't we planning that when we built the developments along Station Ave? So it's not etched in stone as to whether that would be their site for their new property. So that's why they're saying just block it out until
Right.
they can figure out what to do.
That is probably, if you think about it, it takes, the superintendent was saying it's like 5 years between when you start to when kids are going to that school. So it's gonna be a while.
Yeah,
Kathy, my other observation is I think they have underestimated, certainly in allocating time, the public input. And we certainly saw that when we were doing the ADUs. You really need, he says something and then it gets refined, you have to go back and forth. There's a lot of iteration. I don't think there's enough time built in here, quite frankly, for public input. I don't know how you correct that. Maybe you have maybe you have a weekly meeting or something, but certainly with the ADUs, the more information that people were exposed to, the more ideas they had, the more things got refined, and people changed their minds. And I did not see that in here. I see a couple of public meetings. I see the January, February, March stuff, and then the normal meetings that we would have, plus the regular ones. But I think there should be some asterisk someplace that says we need to be conscious that if necessary, we have to build in more public input.
without question. I look at those dates, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting
it's okay,
Joanne,
go
but
ahead,
you look at the dates, January, February, March, there's a fair amount of the population of Yarmouth that happens to be in Florida at that time of year, so
Think of bad weather.
I'll say nothing of bad weather.
Again, referring to a meeting with Mr. Scott today, the plan that he explained to us is on a quarterly basis, they will be presenting to the Board of Selectmen exactly where they are, what milestones they've achieved, and what's in the next quarter that they expect to receive. So that public meeting of the board is where anyone and everyone can find out what's going on. And the more they publicize that, the better. I think that what helped us on the ADUs is that it was fairly well publicized. And you had an active interest from the community in it as well.
And also a commitment from this board that when people wanted to talk about it, we accommodated them. That was on our agenda almost every single
Yeah,
meeting for
absolutely,
over a year.
absolutely, it was.
If not a minor discussion or a major discussion.
Not to one-up you, Susan, but let me remind us of the 50-plus public hearings and meetings we did on the drive-in site, and that's nothing compared to what we want to do here.
Exactly, and that was a
I
lot.
mean, it's a park, but this has got far more potential,
Infinitely more
so.
complex.
So I'd agree with Susan that, hopefully that there's somewhere within this mechanism, I'm sure there probably is, we just don't see it yet, where they have the opportunities to have discussions with the community and not just the teams, because,
Yeah, I mean, I will say this much, and this is no different. I think the drive-in site is amazing, but we also don't want it to take 20 years either to get this done. So
agree.
And again, there was, if I heard him correctly again today with our meeting, that public outreach, he's trying to get the committee to develop an approach for that. And in fact, that's why when I mentioned our meeting at the end of the month, which he didn't remember, which he can't remember everything, oh, that's great. We'll use that information, because we'll get a sense. We won't be talking necessarily about the muck, but we'll be talking about the Matakey's property will come up. It always does. So we might get feedback in that way. So, but I think they need to put a communications plan together.
There's a big difference between going to a Board of Selectmen meeting and in that 15-minute public segment, someone comes up and says, I think that's a dumb idea, versus having the board commit to having a board meeting specifically on this project.
Yep.
So that you can get people to the microphone and have them talk without it has to be more of a two-way
Yeah,
conversation.
it can't be at a
So-
selectmen's meeting. It's got to be exclusive for the subject matter.
Yeah,
It has to, if the selectmen want to set up a meeting just on that, that's great.
Right,
And
a
I think
workshop
that's
or
something they
something,
should absolutely consider. Not having it part of an overall agenda, but a very separate meeting quarterly to talk about this
yeah,
project.
where they are.
I'd like to believe that they're going to do that.
I do too. I think they are. It's just, this, again, this memo was about process, getting the teams together, kind of the logistics. And there's a lot of bones behind this that we haven't, are probably in the works that we don't know. We
But
don't know
even
about.
even talking about logistics indicates how complex this is going to be. And we're just talking about dates and times.
Right.
You can imagine what it's going to be like when people are talking about, I think this is a good idea, and someone's saying, I don't think that's so great. That's, this is the poster child for what we're going to be doing for the next 6 months.
I do think Bill did mention that he was going before the select board on their January 7th meeting.
That's correct.
To give basically this overview of what the process is and what's been done to date, and then, like you said, what are they going to be doing in the near future? So it'll be interesting to hear what the select board have to say at that meeting as well.
Yeah, and even on page 3 of the memo that here, it says select board and public, and it says MUC select board meetings and milestone public meetings. So they clearly have the intention of having conversation with the general
Voted
public.
just on this, yeah.
You know that the select board, I'm sure that will be one of their comments as well, that they want to make sure that there's public participation in that.
So Kathy,
Madam Chair, excuse me.
Yes, Mr. Rubenstein.
Hello. I just wanted to follow up on the meeting you had with Mr. Scott today, and as it relates to earlier planning board comments about the timetable in the memo. What happens after early July in the best case scenario? Was that discussed at all?
No.
I think after that, then your proposals would be going to the MUC, and they would be digesting it and coming up with different things that they'd like to see, I think, the consultant put to paper. You need a picture of the
Okay,
different
yeah,
ideas.
I mean, as I keep thinking about this, even with the little drawing in the memo on page, hold on, where is it? The drawing on the bottom of page 4, I keep thinking about the trash compactor scene in Star Wars. That's kind of what, and I say that with all due
Or
respect.
making sausage.
Exactly, which we all know what we shouldn't be ever having to see in public. Besides legislation in this case, which is kind of what we're doing. So it feels like this, I agree with my colleagues that this is an aggressive timetable, which I'm actually kind of impressed with, that they're trying to say, okay, we're going, we're off to the races here. I think we know that there will be a slower pace than what they're proposing. And that's why I guess it remains to be seen. I guess I'm talking to myself. Remains to be seen how it goes. But I guess I'm not really clear as to, okay, we get to this place where there's 5 teams, 5 proposals, if I got that right. And then I guess I'm not 6 teams, 6 proposals. They get presented to the select board. Then what? I don't know. I just not really clear about that. And maybe I'm not supposed to be, for another year. But I just hope you can share that
I
information
actually
with me.
do have an answer to that, Will,
Thank you.
and it was in the materials that the committee, the MUC, received for their first meeting. So in that memo from Bill Scott to the committee, he outlined a lot of things beyond July.
Okay, Madam Chair, I can find that.
Yeah.
That's not,
So it's in there, and it goes all the way out to, the last date
Oh,
is
yeah, that was very
implementation,
deep.
July of 2026. So he has a timetable in that package
Okay.
of final presentation
Thank you.
handoff happening in July 2026.
Would be
all right,
great.
I will follow up and look at that material. Thank you.
Is this posted, that memo? I have a copy of it because I asked Kathy to print a copy for me.
Yes, it's under
Is it under
Agenda
MUC?
Center, yeah, under.
I thought you had
Matty
sent
Keys.
this to us.
I did send it
Did
to you.
send- she
But
sent
it's
it
also
to
on
us,
the, it's
yeah.
also posted.
Right,
It's an-
but I don't think we're talking about the same.
Yeah, we are. The first memo from them was sent to
But I
us.
think
Their November 20th meeting,
Right.
Yeah.
right? Or their
Right, we-
November
definitely get it.
7th meeting.
I have one dated November 1st. That's the memo I'm talking about.
The November 20th packet's good because he included the original memo from the previous meeting in addition to then the proposed process that they talked about. So I think that's the one that I printed out for you, Susan.
Madam-
This was the package that Kathy sent us. Their first meeting was November 20th. And this is all the material that was in their packet for the November 20th meeting.
Madam
I
Chair,
have a copy if you want.
I don't have
Mr.
that.
Saban.
is there any point in this process that economic development consultants, professionals, will be brought in to review? I mean, we can come up with all these crazy ideas, but I fall back to this idea about building a marina and finding 20 years later it wasn't economically feasible.
As we understand
So
it-
I'm hoping that somewhere in this plan, there's the ability for some professionals to take a look to see if we're crazy or not.
Again, it's covered in one of the memos.
Or in his details.
Where some of these committees, these teams, land use teams, have committees that have money. So the Community Housing Committee has money. So that committee intends to use money from the Community Housing or the Affordable Housing Trust.
Yeah.
There's leftover money from something where they can hire a consultant to take a look. CEDC has access to money where they can, if they want, retain a consultant. And again, in my reading of it and listening to Bill today, anywhere that there's a pocket of money that's available to the individual teams, they'll try to latch onto it.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question on that? Does that make a ton of sense, having, all the different teams? There's a pocket of money here and there, and everyone say, let's go hire our own consultant. I mean, to me, circling back to what Jim said, you hire a consultant to have them come back and say, this is an economically viable use of this property. Just a comment.
I think it's more, as I understand it, reading it, it's to get the three proposals ready, and have them in some case, some state of viability. But there is going to be a master, what's the title?
Development
A
consultant?
master development plan consultant.
Okay.
That RFP is
that
being
answers
written
it.
right now.
Is that going to be held by the MUC? Are they, they're the ones going to hire that person?
Yes.
Okay,
So the town will.
okay.
But I believe the master development plan consultant will report to the MUC.
Okay, can I just piggyback on something? Because I think it's a very good point about these individual teams hiring consultants. If they're going to do that, I do think there should be some guidance either from the MUC or from the board itself, the select board itself, saying, look, if you're going to spend public money on a consultant, here are the questions you should be asking, so that everyone's asking the same question at the same time. Not, we want to do this, make it work. There should be a series of questions that the board or the MUC identifies, and if you're going to hire a consultant, this is what you should be asking, to play on their apples-to-apples comparison, so that when they get the answers to these questions, the answers should fall into that apples-to-apples comparison. Because, a consultant will tell you whatever you want to hear, whatever they think you want to hear.
That's right.
Again-
So you don't want someone coming up and saying, oh, this is a fabulous idea, and Recreation saying, no, that's not a great idea. Our consultant said it's not a good idea. That will occur if they're not working into the same set of questions. So maybe one of the recommendations planning could make to Scott is those committees that want to use public money for consultants, these are the questions you can ask, or these are the parameters under which you can spend the public money, so that we don't have competition, in the sense that we have one committee saying, one consultant saying, yes, you can do this, and another one saying, no, you can't.
Well, I think that's going to be the master development plan consultant. The teams are just throwing out the ideas of things that they think based on their experience, like housing, what we need for housing, what types of housing we need, and kind of a general idea of how much housing we need.
Again, I'll refer to the memo from the chair of the committee. And I heard Bill talk about this as well.
What page, Joanne?
I'm on page 4. The proposal request. During this phase, MUC provides a questionnaire to the team that formulates the guidance for each group to submit a proposal. They are going to the MUC is going to provide to each team a common questionnaire, if you will, a common format, a common design for what the proposals should come in at, so that they're not all over the place. So
Like
they're trying to
CPC
set up some
does.
standards on what the submissions should look like, as if it were a grant proposal. So these are the rules you have to follow to submit your 3 proposals. And they need to look like this, they need to have this, 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 and this. That's my understanding of what he had said and what the memo.
I think procurement is the other issue. I think for housing, I think we, the town of Yarmouth, gets 30 hours through the regional housing, which I think that's Judy Barrett's firm that's hired to do that. So that's good 30 hours from her group is going to be very substantial, and I think they could come up with some good things. But if you want to hire all these different consultants, just hiring a consultant takes a long time. You have to go for an RFP, you have to review the RFPs, and you have to, finalize the scope, hire the person, and then get the work done. That's going to be a little bit time consuming.
Within this timeframe especially.
So,
But I mean, for housing, we know that 30 hours exists, and that's not it's not, you don't need to go through all sorts of procurement
Correct.
loopholes. But I thought CEDC had some flexibility as well with some things. But I could be wrong.
I think if it's the town procuring a consultant, there's a process
Yeah,
that needs
that's
to happen.
right.
Maybe we could just do
Maybe
something
it's
as
part of
simple
that.
as 3 quotes. That's possible as well. We do have a list.
Well, we'll rely on,
within a dollar amount.
yeah.
Yes.
We'll let
granted.
Peter get back to us on
Yeah,
that.
and he's right, it is within a dollar amount. If you're below a certain amount, you can just do best business practices and that type of thing. So there is a process, and just getting someone to reply to your proposal takes a little bit of time,
Yeah.
or your ideas, so.
So, Madam Chair, if I can make a couple quick comments. In my profession, I'm a real estate appraiser, or have been for the last 30 years. In the business world, when you have a piece of property like this, the first question you ask is, what is the highest and best use? And there's a process in which that you go through. As an appraiser, we have to analyze, is it financially feasible? Is it physically possible? And is it legally permissible? So when we go through this process, somewhere along the line, somebody's got to stop and do that to decide, is this financially feasible? I'm not so much concerned about legally permissible, because we can change zoning through the community. But financially feasible and physically possible are 2 key elements to any project, whether you want to build the Trump Towers or a neighborhood of housing. And I'm hoping, I don't see anywhere in this where that element kicks in, where we say, time out, does this all make sense?
Right. Well said, Jim.
I think with regard to the financially feasible, I think that's part of that, part of your proposal, with the help from the assistant town administrator on different funding mechanisms to make these things happen. So I know that in our community, we're not going to spend all our money on it. How are we going to fund this, and how can we tap into every single grant that's possible? How can we make these things happen? And if it's all on our dime, it's just not going to happen.
So is it expected that each one of those teams would ask those 3 questions before they send their proposal into the MUC? I would think they would. You would have to have, I mean, what you're sending forward, you hope would meet those.
You want your
Well, I don't
proposal
think
to be
you'd
as
wanna
strong
do it
as
at that
possible.
level, because the tests of financially feasible, so if you want to build and again, I'll go back to the convention center idea. If you wanted to build a convention center, now you need to have the architect who's going to tell you, how much is it going to cost to do that? So I think the idea here is just throw everything against the wall and see what sticks, and then start picking away what makes sense and what doesn't make sense.
So who ultimately is going to ask those 3 questions? The MUC itself, the committee
think the
itself?
Yeah.
I think, and that's when they
So
get,
that's the final filter.
yeah, and I think that's where they have to stop and say,
Okay.
bring in the professionals.
And I think that's where it has to go to. I think the muck is there to field the balls that are being thrown to them, put them in silos, then you got to get a pro involved. That's really how I see it happening.
I agree.
We have $225,000 that was voted at town meeting
Yep.
for this analysis, so there's definitely funds available.
Come up with some great ideas, a balloon factory. You know?
Convention center's interesting, but that might be a situation where we put out an RFP for the land to someone else to build the convention center.
Yeah, the town wouldn't be building a convention center.
Convention
It
center.
is an interesting thought when you think about where it's located.
Yeah, and there has to be enough bandwidth for it, though, not just in Yarmouth, but
Yeah.
economic. You know, there's been private studies done by the Cape Chamber. You don't have to reinvent the wheel there. Just go down and get the paperwork. I know Wendy Northcross, there was studies for convention centers done in downtown Hyannis. There was discussion by Paul Schwartz, who used to own The Point. He's put money in towards a study in Yarmouth for a convention center. There's been talks, you know, from my hotel days for ages.
And all that now
Certainly.
will be wrapped around the prospect of bridge construction.
That's right, exactly right.
Very interesting point, yeah.
Have a great
And
convention
also,
center.
and
no
also
one-
just to follow up on that, with the recent sale of the conference center,
That's right.
it's called, in Hyannis to the Riverview School, it's unclear as to whether that's going to be run as a conference center
Exactly.
with the Riverview School support, or if it's going to be turned into something else because that's contiguous to the Twin Acres
Yeah, Twin Acres, yeah.
Twin Acres Golf
Brooks,
Course. So,
Twin Brooks,
in
yeah.
theory, we might be losing conference space on the Cape.
Yeah.
Who
My-
knows?
My understanding is that we are, so.
We are.
So, who wants to
Tell
be?
me what the blue space on the, you've had that.
I was going to ask the same question. Can you go through your map, Kath? Did you want to go through your memo on the zoning
I
stuff a
guess I
little
just,
bit?
are we going to do the teams? Who wants to be on what
Oh,
team?
yeah, let's do teams
I'm not a team
first.
player.
You made the biggest fuss, so which one do you want to be
What do you mean
on?
I made the biggest fuss? I pointed out
You went to the select board and read your letter, so which one do you want to?
well, I read our letter for the reasons different than the fact that I read the letter because it wasn't put, it was ignored and not put in their packet.
I think recreation is a big one, and we definitely need to have
So these
someone who can.
these 6 teams are the teams that we're supposed to either.
Yes,
now,
so
which- but
we
don't
already have housing and economic development with Joanne and Peter, so it's recreation, open space, municipal services, and education.
Recreation, open space.
Say it again, Kath?
So it's recreation, open space, municipal services, and education.
I'll do municipal services, because I already have an idea.
Well, may I suggest a different process than all of us just saying what we want? I
You
I
may.
hear where you're coming from. Madam Chair, do you have an idea in mind of how you'd like to do this?
No, I just, if you're interested, speak up.
Okay, just wanted to make sure we were all playing on the same
Yeah, if you're interested, speak up.
playground.
And
Okay,
if 2 people are interested, we'll work it out.
understood.
I'll do open space if that's open.
I mean, that dovetails pretty nicely. Educate, just given the work I already put in on the school building committee, it feels like 100 years ago. But, as my grandfather likes to say, the bus always comes back to the bus stop. So I would throw my hat in for education.
And thank you for doing recreation, Jim.
Madam Chair, I'd like to volunteer to do recreation.
He's a team player, Madam Chair. He already.
We already decided
I
that.
was going to nominate you, Bill, for, for education anyway, so you dodged that bullet.
Joanne, your
I
housing.
think I walked in front of it. I think
What
this
about
is another-
Peter? Is he economic? is
He's
he-
a EDC.
Yeah.
That's what I thought, okay.
Those two are by default already there.
And, as we go through this, every year, we change up our participation on housing in CEDC, and the availability of people might change, so this might not be forever, but it is at least for now. Thank you, I appreciate your cooperation on that.
I will have a ball.
Thank you, Kathy. So, we don't need a vote on that.
No.
So, Madam Chair, just to be clear, does that mean we will hear from the muck about how these, or each
Yes,
team
we will be
leader or something?
Go ahead, Kathy.
I am going to relay all this information to Bill Scott, and I'm also going to copy the staff person who is responsible, like Brittany probably, and maybe Christine Marzigliano related to open space, Mark Smith related to the education, recreation, Anthony, just so that the staffers know that we want to be informed of when these meetings are happening.
That'd be
I'd like
great.
to think there becomes like a list where people have identified, because we don't want to all be meeting on the same night, or people won't be able to go to all the different,
Right.
the different
Or
things. so.
Wednesday nights.
Or Wednesday, yeah, right, Wednesday nights. So I will relay all of that.
And just as a follow-up, Madam Chair, does that mean you would then like us in our own planning board meetings, starting at the end of January, to start reporting back to the planning board on what each of us are doing in addition to our other commitments, to our other subcommittees? Is that how I'm reading this?
Yes, you are.
Yes, please.
And again, Kathy and I talked about this. I think we should have a standing item on the agenda to cover whatever meetings any of us have attended with regard to this. So there'll be a standing item
you.
on the agenda.
Automatic, not just under,
No, I think we should have a standing item on the agenda.
Starting in January.
Yeah,
Mark
starting in
update.
January, yeah. And I will share with you the complexity of getting a schedule together. Just the community housing is trying to get a schedule together and with the Affordable Housing Trust to talk about the first team meeting, and it's all over the place with people. It's just a tough time of year. I don't know how. Anyway, I may not be able to attend the first meeting because of schedule.
I would like to attend as many as possible, because I kind of feel
I think
like
they've locked in when it's going to be, but
you need to have, it's nice to hear everything and everybody.
Yeah.
And then you can coalesce some things and
You'll
maybe.
hear it from us.
The condensed version, sometimes it's nice to hear the nuances at the meeting.
And I hope most of them are recorded. Like I know for housing, it'll be recorded.
Definitely, yes.
So, and CEDC is recorded. I don't know if the others are.
Recreation is not.
Yeah.
But aren't they supposed to keep minutes? At a minimum, they're
There's
supposed to keep
minutes, but the level of minutes vary by
Yeah.
committee, really. In education, I mean, may not be the school committee, it may just be, a group of the,
Yeah, I think it's going to be more ad hoc, because I don't
Yeah.
think the school committee structure is going to, I don't know, I could be wrong. Dr. Smith, I'm sure, has an idea about what he's gotten pulled into now. Or he will.
nothing else going on, he's fine. So do you want to go over?
Sure, yeah.
So, just because I'm a nerd and I want to see everything on a map, and I want to do that constraints analysis, because I need to know myself kind of what's going on here. So, in your packet, there's a little memo that I put together. Total, the property line is basically runs right through Tar Pond coming down, and it's a square like that.
Where is the property line again? Is it the red?
The red line.
It's the magenta line, it runs right through Tar Pond and then comes over here. Here's the police station, Wellfield.
Oh,
Land.
it goes through Tar Pond.
Goes through Tar Pond.
Okay.
Yep. And these little dashed lines are all the different trails that run through there.
And the east side is also town land, correct?
This is all town Wellfield land.
What
This
is the blue, Kath?
The blue
That's
is.
the back property line for Mattakese.
No, the blue
Yeah,
lake.
It's on the biomap, which identifies different areas as a critical landscape habitat. It's just one of those things where maybe open space might be interested, and conservation might be interested in that. So this might be a case where, maybe some of this area in the back is kind of open space and left that way to preserve all those things.
Oh, I was looking
And
at
Kat-
it.
sorry.
I was looking at a different blue, sorry. Reservoir
question.
is what
So
I was
there are-
looking at.
There are two town-owned parcels. One cuts through Town Pond,
Tar Pond,
and then the
yes.
other one is to the east of that. And are we talking, when we're thinking about this project, are we thinking about just the first parcel that includes the school property, or are we talking about both properties?
Just
Kathy?
the school property, just this giant rectangle here.
Got it. So not the bigger rectangle is important to know for the context,
Yes.
but not for the actual
Correct.
mucking.
And when the map gets done, I'm sure it will concentrate just on
Right.
the Mattakese property.
We own the property,
We own this property over here to the east and to the
okay.
south, and then this is the police station. And then up here is the Bayberry Hills, this butts Bayberry Hills here, and then this is like the residential area over here. These are the 10 parcels that the town recently purchased for
Right.
wellhead protection.
So again, the big blue area is restricted for some
It's not restricted, but I think you're going to, like, depending on what you wanted to do there, it is a critical landscape on the biomass map. So it's
See, I'm
something,
just speaking from personal experience. It just means more Conservation Commission, at the very least, oversight and possible state of Massachusetts involvement.
and
I'll use it
and
that
if you
way.
have the commission involved, it might involve all of that.
So while it may be 70 acres, it's not 70 buildable acres.
No.
That's for sure.
Correct.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So it is also important to know this property, it's 70 acres total, but it was purchased in 1960 for school purposes. So any change other than school or purposes, or if we're subdividing this for different types of purposes, we would probably have to we definitely have to go to town meeting and have that changed.
Yeah,
So
go
that's
to
just
state, too?
something to think about. No, I don't, no, it's not like an Article 97 situation. I believe it's just town meeting that would be necessary. We also have the ground-mounted solar panels here next to Emmy Small, and these were permitted as an educational use related to that back in about 2014. And then here's Matt, this is the main auditorium with the gym in it, and these are all the different extra little pods that might end up see whether there's something that needs to stay or not. We're actually in a good place on Higgins Crow Road. It does have the shared use pathway on it that's almost completed now, that's going to connect in with the Cape Cod Rail Trail extension, so people can bike here through the rail trail, which is nice. And then you go up there's a signalized intersection, pretty easy to get on to the Mid-Cape, and then south to Buck Island, so that's good direction that way, and then further down to Route 28. So not a bad location. Currently, right now, there's no public transit that comes up Higgins Crow Road. So some of the site considerations that we're looking at, obviously Tar Pond here, it's really more of a deep marsh. I don't think it has standing water in it, but it does have a natural heritage. It is a priority habitat of rare species, so that whole red area, you're not touching anything in that area because you don't want to be subject to a potential taking. So that's something that we would need to protect. And then there is obviously, Tar Pond itself is a wetland, as well as this little, I'm not sure if it's isolated, but it's a little wetland in the front. Those basically have a 50-foot buffer from them where you can't have any structures, and then 100-foot, anything within 100 foot, you'd have to go to the Conservation Commission and talk to them about it. So this may be a case where we just block off a little area here and say, we're just not going to do anything over there, and we'll protect that little area. We're not in a floodplain, so that's good news. It helps us there. Just talking about stormwater management, this is a very large site. There's going to be more than 1 acre of disturbance. We're going to need to get a stormwater management permit, so there'll be some additional requirements with regard to stormwater because of the size of it. The entire parcel is located within the Zone 2 wellhead contributions for all the wells. There's some wells that in the nearby property that are highlighted here, and a little 1,000-foot from one of this well here, it kind of cuts across the corner of that property. So another good reason of maybe protecting that particular area.
I think, where is that well again? Show it again.
There's a well right here,
There, those blue
there's
dots.
blue dots, and then right over here. Here and here.
Okay.
And then there's one here as well. So a tiny little piece of it, but it's kind of taken up with the tar pond anyway. There's some overlapping resource areas there. The other thing is, like, it's more of a permitting thing to take into consideration is there is a minority environmental justice area mapped on the other side. So that is probably something that, depending on what happens there, will need to be taken into consideration in permitting.
Kathy, can I ask a question? What does minority in English, what does the word isolation mean? On the bottom where it says Census 2020, you've got all the colors.
Yep.
It's minority in English isolation, income in English. What does isolation mean?
English isolation means that English is not your primary language, and so you're isolated because of your language barrier.
Oh, okay, so
We're
nothing
just
to do-
yellow. We're just minority. It's
Okay.
not
Okay.
more than that.
I thought there was one area in here that matched that magenta dot.
Oh, no,
Okay.
nope, sorry. It's all just right here on this
Okay.
side. It's hard to get the different colors on the mass mapper. I probably could have done a better job. As I mentioned, the ground-mounted solar, I think maybe it's like what Jim was saying, an assumption needs to be made that maybe we get rid of that, and how might we lay out some stuff. Again, if it's a situation where it's 5 years from now, it's probably a 20-year lease. It's probably not that much time difference before it runs out, or maybe we buy them out. I don't know the situation on that, but maybe some assumptions around the solar panels. Matakees also has solar panels on the roof of the gymnasium. So zoning, it's all residential. It's R40 residential, so there's not as many uses that would be allowed, especially business-related or economic development-related. With housing, we have a lot of different types of options. We do have inclusionary zoning, as you know. But when any type of subdivision or cluster subdivision, or single-family homes, duplexes, that type of thing, our density is still going to be very low, 1 to 2 units per acre. So we're not going to get any high density based on what we have on the books right now. Congregate living, it's 59 and over. That is something that can be done on a minimum 20-acre lot.
Right.
And then you might be able to double your density there, so you might get up to like 2.2 units per acre. But that's still not very, very significant. So one of the ways of maybe getting around it, under current regulations without changing anything, is whether we would have like a friendly Chapter 40B project, which allows you to modify some of the zoning in a sense. And it requires 20 to 25% of affordable. But this is something where the town would be in control. You would be put out an RFP for this land, and you would have very specific criteria, how many units you wanted, what type the buildings would be. Maybe you say, I don't want anything more than 2 stories or a certain height. I want a mix of different types of units. Maybe we have some single families, some cottages, townhouses, those types of things. You can be in control of that, as well as what the design and site parameters might be. Lots of times in Mary, in some of the things where she's given money for projects, it basically says it needs to be approved by like the design review committee or these types of things, just to be sure that we have a nice design for the project. Municipal services are also something that's allowed, and it would encompass all types of public building services and utilities, and so it would include like a library or community center or any of our town offices or fire departments. Some of the other things that may fall under this category, sometimes we do rent out some of our buildings. Like the senior center has dances. So senior center isn't necessarily a dance hall, but we do rent out and get permission through the use of town-owned property for them to utilize that for different uses. So that might be a case, if this remains a town-owned property, that they can do something along those lines, lease it out, and have different organizations utilize it as well. But that's a little bit time-consuming because each event needs to go through that process, and it can take a little bit of time to evaluate and make sure it's meeting all the building code requirements and that type of thing.
Yeah. Would it make sense to take zoning off the board?
Oh, I think when you're coming up with your ideas, yes. I just want to make people understand that these are some of the ways we could do certain things within
Our current zoning.
And then at the bottom, it talks
Throw
about
zoning
zoning.
out the board,
At the
then
bottom,
we-
it talks about zoning amendments of things that you could do in order to modify it. So yeah, whatever people want to do, but this was just trying to give you an idea of what the current zoning can and cannot provide for you. Recreation, municipal recreational uses are certainly something that are allowed, but other types of amusements, like if there's a privately run concert hall, that would be something that wouldn't currently be allowed. And then economic development, all different types of economic development, like retail, restaurants, bars, all of those things are not allowed in residential zoning districts right now. Obviously, education and open space and water supply are. And then talking about zoning amendments, I did run it by town council, who was not concerned about any issues with spot zoning due to the large size of the property. And then I know that Bill Scott has mentioned a Chapter 40R smart growth overlay district. That's something that I think needs a little bit more research, because there are certain minimum requirements. You need to have a certain number of units per acre for different types of housing. You can do it through mixed use. It does come with money, so that might be something that might also be attractive. But that's it's basically an overlay district for this particular property.
Right.
So that's a little bit of a heavy lift. That's why I wanted to know, what can we do under our current regulations if we wanted to move forward? So then we would know how much time would be necessary if we wanted to make some particular changes. And then just talking about other regulatory requirements. I mean, the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, depending on what we're doing here, and also the Cape Cod Commission DRI process. They require a DRI if you're subdividing property 30 acres and larger. So there's, even just for us to subdivide it, we would have to do some type of DRI with the commission. And then there's a more detailed, little zoning summary map, table, in your packets as well.
What phase of sewering is this?
2.
It will be something that it would have to be its own
It'd
line.
have to be its own spur down to
So
it.
it's not in any of the current planned phasing? So you'd have to plan to,
I think it is.
I don't believe it is, Kathy.
I included it when we did the build-out analysis. I assumed that we were going to have some heavy build-out here, or potential for it, but I don't think it's actually connected in right now.
that's certainly going to throw a wrench in a lot of it, too.
You just have to find ways to pay for $4 million worth of sewer extension, because Buck Island's not that far. I mean, the treatment plant, it's a little bit further down Buck Island,
And
but
what you do,
it could just be a force main, too. It's, so it might just-
and also what you're going to do, how it will affect the plant in itself, because it's capacity, so you can't just say, let's go throw a line up there, because it's going to affect the capacity levels of your plant.
Yeah, I think, and Will can maybe identify, but I think it's built through 3 phases, so I think the treatment, I don't know. Is he pondering or is he not there?
I mean, there's so much left to do just to get phase 1 handled, Jim. You know, they only permitted 375,000 gallons with the new plant. And, you know, the golf course is going to have to take a lot of the rest of it to get up to the million plus. And that's just to get us to phase 1. Notwithstanding, gosh, we just spent all this money on that mixed use pass going right up Higgins Kroll. Now let's just slap a big old sewer line down there. Let's just tear that whole thing up and put a sewer line under it.
Well, put it
Again,
above ground.
It's nobody's fault. I'm just
Monorail.
saying, like, these are the
Stuff happens.
poop happens, as they say in the sewer business.
Okay,
that's-
thank you, Kathy.
Them's the facts.
And also, Madam Chair, I would like to thank Kathy for being a nerd. I am one as well. But this memo was so helpful. It just TLDR'd the whole thing. And I implore the muck to please use this as a, you know, as a reference document, because one of the things that's going to happen with all these, you know, teams meeting is that we all have to agree on what is the data. You know, we at least, all 6 teams have to agree. What do we agree on before we each go into our little 6 tributaries? And I'm so glad that Kathy did this, because there's no disputing, you know, Kathy's memo. And I hope, like you said earlier, Jim, zoning on the board, zoning off the board, it's important that we all have a home base to start from, you know, whether we like the current state of the building or don't. So I thank you, Kathy, for that work.
You're welcome.
Kathy, when did you want to touch on what you dropped with us for LCP?
Staff updates?
Okay, great. So we'll move on to meeting minutes, which we have none.
I am 3, and now with this meeting, 4 meeting minutes behind. I've never been that far behind before. I know, I'm so far behind. So yes, no meeting minutes,
meeting
sorry.
Any committee updates?
I'm sorry. Will, you go
Okay,
ahead.
go ahead, Ken. I'll
No.
go last.
Okay, I just wanted to update on CIP. We actually are meeting tonight. I chose this meeting to be at rather than theirs. They were to meet with the Finance Committee tonight, just to review all the capital requests and get that all squared away with Finance. We're actually coming in front of Select Board later in the month. I'm not exactly sure the date, but I should know that. I think it's 12/17. To review the final capital recommendations. There was some items that were not approved by CIP, but quite a bit was, and we thank the town departments for their efforts.
Mr. Rubenstein, Will?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The RAC Committee met on Monday. Just a few headlines that came out of it. As I mentioned just a minute ago, the town is definitely still working through the DEP process in order to find more ways to get to 1.5 million gallons. And that will, certainly involve Bayberry Hills, but there's no real clarity there, but there is progress and there are ongoing meetings with DEP, and that's a good thing. I think we're all aware that work is still continuing, especially as I tried to get to Dairy Queen today. And I got there.
Sorry.
I got there eventually, which, by the way, they're open for another 10 days. Just kind of nice. Let's see. we did have the officially had the authorization to award for the new plant. And there was even a pre-construction meeting right before Thanksgiving. They are mobilizing and doing prep work as of, I would say, by February 1st. So that is pretty exciting news that means that plant is going to be built and it is going to be paid for. That is good news.
Will, do you know who was awarded the contract?
Oh, Ken.
Sorry, Will.
I don't. I don't have it right in front of me. I'm so sorry. Wait, do I have it right in front of me? Hang on. This is great for the meeting for me to be doing this. I am so sorry. I don't have it at my fingertips.
That's fine.
It's fair to say it was competitively and voraciously bid. Let's see. Speaking of other phases, contracts 5 and 6. So we're talking west of Parker's River, going to the Barnstable town line. There's been some more general paperwork bureaucracy still going on at the state level. However, I think in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and maybe after the new year, the letters will go out to all of those folks that own parcels, commercial or residential. And that's basically the letters to say, here's your stub location, and who do you talk to if you don't love it? That's basically what the letter says. And the town has a rep through the contractors so that folks can meet right at your home or your business and talk about the stub you have, the stub you want, the stub you need, the stub you don't have, stub talk. And then lastly, Madam Chair, most of our meeting was taken up by the discussion surrounding the Pump Station 2 location and the extra special town meeting that is happening on Monday night. I think it's fair to say that there are ongoing discussions between the town of Yarmouth and the petitioner about how to find some resolution on the location of Pump Station 2 and Mr. Wilson's business that may, up to and including, anything could happen Monday night. I'll just put it that way, Madam Chair. But there seem to be healthy discussions both during our meeting, which is a public meeting and can be watched. You can watch the replay. But it feels like there's lots of opportunity for everybody to figure this out. I think it's unfortunate that they couldn't have just done that and not have to force this ridiculous special town meeting question about it. It feels like the conversation that we had at our RAC meeting on Monday is something that we could have had a month ago and not triggered a special town meeting at all. And I'm just still puzzled as to how, despite the public's right to do these things, and I'm not disparaging that right, it just seems that we've gone down a path, Madam Chair. Anyway, so the good news is there were conversations. All the players were there. We had the town's consultants. We had Mr. Snowden along with Mr. Wilson. We had Mr. Rittenauer was there. Who else was there? Mark Forrest was there. We had everybody there. The DPW folks were obviously there. So I guess what I'm trying to say is anything could happen Monday night. And it's also not entirely clear, Madam Chair, what's going to happen depending on how the vote goes on Monday night. I think that's a pretty fair statement. But having said all that, there's definitely going to be more progress to be made on the current contracts. And thankfully, the weather has been reasonable. And one last thing, the state of Massachusetts on an ongoing basis now is going to give the town permission to continue the work on 28, even though we are beyond, we're into winter, according to the state definition. Ooh, look at that, confetti. I better be careful.
That's right. Confetti.
My Mac might do all kinds of things. Anyway, the bottom line is more progress. New treatment plant starting by the end of February, and hopefully things will resolve themselves on this new pump station. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
They also voted the $500,000 to continue with the study at the special
Yes.
town meeting?
It wasn't at the special town meeting, so I did hear it passed.
Yeah. So they're going to be looking at other the different ways of effluent discharge, mainly at Bayberry, right?
Yeah, and that to me, Kathy, that vote was more just formalizing something that we've been talking about for, well, since the state came down from the mountain with the tablet that said, "Oh, you wanted 1.5 million gallons? We'll give you 375." So we've been dealing with that, and the good news is, like I said, Kathy, the town continues to meet with DEP and to figure out ways to use Bayberry, and I think I've mentioned earlier, Madam Chair, some land around the Exit 8 interchange that the state owns in order to handle that extra gallons, or those extra gallons.
Okay, thank you. Any other committee?
Madam Chair, I have a few things, if I can.
Sure.
First of all, Will, thank you for that very informative information about rec. I hope you guys all show up at town meeting. It's going to be a circus. The Design Review Committee, thank you, is meeting the 10th to discuss 1230 Route 28, which is just down the street here on this side of the road. It was the old trading post that caught fire. So we're going to be looking at that design next week.
What's the proposal?
Just to redevelop the property with a new building.
Oh, commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same,
No.
oh, okay.
No. And I don't know a lot of the details. I'm trying to keep an open mind and hear what is presented and make a decision as to what I like and don't like. I have a couple of things I'm concerned with, but
Got to look better than what's there now, Jim.
true. I think one of my concerns is the location of the garage door, but other than that, we'll figure that out when I get there. The second thing, to our listening audience, it's still not too late to get yourself a plank at the boardwalk, yarmouth.ma.us/plank. /planks. Great Christmas gift, 24 characters or less. Fill it out, stick it under the tree, make somebody a happy camper. That's all I got.
I thought you were going to say 24 karat gold, they're all,
I thought that's where he was going with it.
Characters
That's your plank, Jim.
yeah, right.
Any other committee?
I will add, if I can, just because I did mention about the drive-in site, I did have an opportunity to go out and get a quick tour, I think last week, and it is coming along amazingly. They're putting in all the pilings and everything for the boardwalk itself. They're going to build the first section as a mock to see what it's going to look like, and to see if they've got to make any change before they get all this out there. So it's coming right along the boardwalk itself. It's all been laid out in a circular path up to where the bridge goes. The grounds themselves, the stonework that they took, a lot of the stone that was on the site from, I'm not even sure where that all came from, but
Yeah, I
We've
think
been
some
there
of it
for
might have come
years.
from the Parkers River Bridge.
yeah, so they've been able to use that for, landscape or hardscapes and stuff, and it's pretty exciting and I think you're all going to like what you see when it's done.
Right?
Ellie Lawrence did just do another drone flyover, I think it was Monday. So we'll try to get that up on the town website so people can see it. It's very profound difference, and I love it, and I'm so glad she does it because she kind of does it every month, and we can really see the progress that's happening.
So that will be up soon, Kathy?
Yeah, yep.
Oh, great.
What's the proposed ribbon cutting, Jim?
I'm sorry, the room what?
Proposed ribbon cutting for the site?
You'd have to ask the Board of Selectmen what that date is. We've still got to build the bathroom facilities and some, so I
Understood.
probably,
I guess I'm, I
List of next year's.
guess that's where I guess I was going with it. What's the target date?
yeah, end of next summer,
Okay.
assuming everything goes well. And it is.
Yeah, they're doing a very good job.
Looks really cool. That's all I have.
I attended the CPC committee today. We're making our final recommendations on CPA funding. We have two proposals that are left that we'll be discussing at our meeting on the 18th. I reviewed at our last meeting, I won't go through them again, the ones that we've already gone through. But we went over our budget today, and we've got, the budget was, that we've the final numbers have come in, and they're better than what our estimates were. So I think the conservative estimates that the team puts together, the town staff put together, worked out well, and we've got some extra money to put in reserves that will make some money for us. And we'll be making our final recommendations at our next meeting. It includes the Revolutionary War Monument. They're coming back to the board, the select board, on the 10th with a location. We didn't want to authorize or recommend anything until we understood that they actually had a location. That will be happening on next week's board meeting. And then we're making a final decision on the YD Red Sox, no, I'm sorry, the Station Avenue Playground. The superintendent, Mark Smith, came back to us and asked for a little bit of extra time to get his proposal in a place that he thought it would be best for us to look at. So the playground improvements at Station Ave will be the second one we'll be looking at.
The Revolutionary War thing was pretty, I don't know if anybody got a chance to watch the selectmen's meeting where they talked about that, but if you can imagine, there were 40, I think the number was 40 residents of the town that participated in the war. You know, and you got to figure back then how many people.
452.
452?
That was like half the town.
Huge number.
It was really.
It was a very large number, but remember.
It was 400.
But remember, Dennis wasn't incorporated, so Dennis was part of us.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a very, very large number, very large number.
pretty amazing.
That's very amazing.
Anyway, staff update. Or correspondence, I guess, Kath, if you've got any.
Yeah, I
any
just,
extra.
I had handed out, just for you guys, I had tried to decipher some of the things that we had talked about at the November 6th meeting with regard to the table of contents for the LCP. There's some red line edits. I don't think it's significantly different. I just wanted to let you guys kind of know. And then I was also going to send it to the Cape Cod Commission and just kind of make sure that they're, I'm sure they are, it follows their template pretty closely, but just kind of give them a little update and just keep them clued into what we're doing on that. I did talk with BSC Group today about the potential format for the report, and we're talking about doing it in a landscape format versus a portrait format. That allows them to have 3 columns, allows a better use of different types of graphics. It also allows you to have a graphic on one side and put some nice text describing it on the other side. So I just wanted to run that by you. I think overall it's going to be pretty good. And then if we ever needed like a fuller, larger map, we could do something with an appendices, or we could actually have the map in a portrait if we really wanted to do something a little bit bigger. So if everyone's okay with that, we'll just have them move forward with that. Okay, because they are working on trying to come up with start fleshing out some of the report, and especially with regard to the existing conditions. And they're hoping to have something to me in preparation for the December 18th meeting. I think we will probably just have a bit of an introduction on the 18th, and then maybe you guys can have some homework as well as myself of looking at it in more details, and we can talk about it at another meeting. We're hoping that because we're not meeting on January 1st because of the new year, that I wanted to see if you guys would be willing to meet on January 8th. And that could be a time when BSC Group could come, talk about the existing conditions. I think they really wanted to get some of your comments on that because that's going to help them come up with the facilitator questions that we would then be talking about at the January 15th meeting in preparation for the January 29th community meeting. So I guess just kind of finding out if everyone's available on the 8th.
Right now, I'm available, Madam Chair.
I'd need to check my calendar, Kath, and I don't have it on my phone, so.
Yeah, if you guys could just send me an
Send you a note?
email, that would be great. So Ken's a definite. And Will Rubenstein's given a thumb up.
Smith.
I'm available.
I'm sorry, Ken Smith and Will.
Kathy, I'm available also.
Okay. Okay. So Jim and Joanne will just let me know, and I'll ask Peter. I'll send something up to Peter.
So you're going to send this along to the Cape Cod Commission?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, unless you had.
Unless anyone has any suggestions or any,
I think
this
it'd
looks
be
like,
good to get their impact,
Yeah.
input.
I'm not too worried about it. I think
No.
they're trying to be as supportive of all the communities doing this as possible. And they've really done a nice
Thinking-
job with the template so that it's really easy.
I think engaging them as, vote early and often, as they say in Chicago. Okay,
Oh, I just had one other thing.
Sure.
The hazard mitigation plan, for that. The survey is out, and it is available at yarmouth.ma.us/HMP for hazard mitigation plan. I'm going to be sending out some stuff to the committees and to the staff, kind of letting it, and I'm working also up on a flyer, and maybe I can help, some of the team members can help get that information out to the public as well. So, been a little behind on the hazard mitigation plan as well, but the survey is out and it's open through January 15th. We've already had some people fill it out
Great.
already, so.
Kathy, is that what we're supposed to remind you about telling us later on? You said to remind,
It was the LCP, it was
LCP.
all the stuff that I just did.
so I wanted to make sure that we reminded you to remind yourself to do it.
Done and done.
for
Madam
the,
Chair, could I ask a quick question of Kathy? And I meant to ask it during staff up during, I guess this is now the right time to ask?
yeah, go ahead.
Has there been any more movement as I continue to be frustrated by the terrible state of our town's website, especially the mobile version, which is literally terrible? And I'm
Yeah.
happy to say that publicly on the record. Has there been any progress with the new app or any new optimization of the town's website?
I have not heard anything, but the last time I mentioned it, it sounded like they were imminent to signing something, so I can follow up with Lori Sullivan on that.
Okay, again, even though the current state is terrible, I still am optimistic, Madam Chair, may I say, about what could be coming for all of us, really.
Kathy, any progress on Great Island? Speaking of progress, it's now been a decade.
Yeah, yeah.
It's running, it's vying for the drive-in site in terms of longevity. Any update on that at all?
You know, in comment to Will's comment about the website, et cetera, I just cut the cable, so you don't get to turn on Channel 8 anymore, but there is an app, and
Yes.
that you can actually go on, and my dear friend Tom Nicanello gave it to me, and I don't have it directly in front of me, but you can actually go on this app and watch selectmen's meetings. And so there's other ways to get your information besides Comcast.
So it's a live, you can watch it live on this?
I don't know if it's live or it might be taped.
Because the Yarmouth YouTube channel,
You can always get that the next day, though. Is it live?
yeah, no, it's not live.
it's
It doesn't
live.
stream.
That's
It
why I
doesn't
had
stream
to-
live on YouTube, which again is another failing. I say this with peace and love. It's another failing of our town. It is 2024, almost 2025, and the fact that we can't live stream our most important town business on the internet in real time is ridiculous.
You can watch it. I mean, you can watch it through the town website. I'm just
Kathy,
saying it does live stream,
Just,
so.
I'm saying that anybody under the age of 40
Okay.
doesn't care. What they care about is turning on YouTube and being able to watch it, which is not an unreasonable request. And again, would be easier if our town website, which I would be happy to use more often, was more user-friendly and had the content in the right format for the right people in the right time.
And it would engage the under 40 crowd far better than it does today, and
It's
I
a
think
beautiful
that's kind of
circle. It's a
critical
virtuous
thing
circle.
about.
And again, I respect the fact that we have wonderful town professionals who are working on this. There's also a lot of important stuff going on, not to mention the muck, Madam Chair, which the more people we get engaged in this process, the better. And they're not going to get it from watching Channel 8.
Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. Upcoming meetings. We got a bunch of them.
Yeah, I think we have a meeting on the 18th. The January one is canceled. Hopefully we'll be adding the January 8th and then January
29th.
15th and then the big
Okay.
one on the 29th. So
Great. I may have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second?
We need to do roll call because of Mr.
Yeah.
Rubenstein.
It's all
Mr.
my fault.
Rubenstein?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Britta?
Aye.
Mr. Saban?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Thank you.